All right. What's going on, fellas? This is Mike D with Black Fathers Now. And yo, we got a dope episode today for you. I'm gonna lead into this a little bit, okay? The brother that we have on is a husband and a father, right? He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, raised in Ripley, Tennessee, prior to moving to Georgia. But guess what? He's also a multi-Grammy Award winner, Soul Train Award winner, MTV Award winner, NAACP Image Award winner, producer, writer, entrepreneur, and so much more. Fellas in the Black Fathers Now family, I want to welcome my man, Brother Speech. What's going on, man?
I'm doing great, bro. That was a great intro. Thank you.
Yeah, I practiced that a few times. Repetition's the mother of learning, right?
I love it. Yeah, man, I'm doing good, brother. Doing good.
Good, man. Well, man, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to holler at us today and just kind of share a little bit about your journey and your story, your inspirations and all. And but before we get started, the tagline for Black Fathers Now is we bring the village to the brothers, right? Bringing the village to the brothers. And first and foremost, before we get started, I always like to have the brothers give shout outs because you need to give a shout out to your village because, look, you're only as good as those that are around you, dig? So, yeah, so give a shout out to your fam, to your village, those that are supporting you right now, man. Go ahead and take the floor.
Sure, yeah, I want to give a big shout out to my mother and my father, first of all, my queen, my wife, Yolanda, my kids, Jahi and Zoe, my fam, people that work with me, Tiffany, Mike, and my man Byron, all of them, and Danielle, his wife. So all of them is my peoples right now. We just, and I could go on and on, but those are the ones that's closest.
Absolutely, man. No doubt, no doubt. Again, you got to give shout outs where they're due. And we put that out front. Most people wait till the end to give shout outs. We're like, no. The village comes first. Dig it.
I love it. Definitely.
No doubt, man. No doubt. So, just your story, man. I mean, you've been very visible for the last 3 decades, but take us back, man. Take us back to, being born in Milwaukee and growing up, Ripley, Tennessee. People don't know Ripley. I actually live in Knoxville, Tennessee. Right. So I know a little bit about
where do you live?
I live in Knoxville. So we're
word up, Knoxville, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm from Augusta, Georgia originally. So I'm from Georgia. Cool. Yeah. So look, you did Tennessee to Georgia. I did Georgia to Tennessee.
Right. There you go. Yeah.
What, take me to another place?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to us about growing up, man.
Well, I grew up in Milwaukee, very segregated town, still is. But I had a very charmed upbringing, to some extent. The racism was very heavy, so that's the part that wasn't charmed. My mother and father were great parents. They did divorce when I was young, but unlike many parents, they stayed friends the whole time. Like to this day, they're still really close. My mom and dad chose me and my brother over their problems. So even when they had problems, even when they decided to divorce, they chose us and over those problems and remained really close. Like my mother, I have to give her the most props because my father was the one that sort of caused the divorce. My mother, she stayed strong and really not only forgave him in a spiritual sense, but she was mature enough to realize the important role that he was going to play in my life and really stayed really close friends with him despite the hurt that he caused her at the time. And he'll say the same thing, we both give her so much love. So yeah, I was raised in a single parent household, but my father was still involved even though they were divorced. And I had my older brother Terry was 7 years older than me and just a very strong man. So that was my upbringing in Milwaukee. My mother owns the largest newspaper, black newspaper in Milwaukee to this day.
Wow.
And she owned it when I was a kid too. So I had the opportunity of seeing black entrepreneurship. I had the opportunity of seeing activism, civil rights issues at the breakfast table every morning. So, I was around a very black and active family, a lot of African art throughout the house and a trip to Africa when I was 2, so wow. My family was very on top of it and striving to teach me what being black in America was all about.
Wow. Now you said your mother, she still has one of the largest or the largest black owned newspaper in America currently? Give it a shout out.
Wisconsin.
Well, it's Wisconsin. Give it a shout out, man.
No doubt. It's called the Milwaukee Community Journal. And it's the #1 African-American newspaper in Wisconsin. And it's going on 44 years. So
Wow.
It's been a minute, since I was 6. I'm 50 now.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
You said something there that was so powerful, man. You said, your parents stayed friends and they chose us over their problems.
They did. They did.
That thing will preach, brother.
Bro, I'll be honest with you. A lot of life's decisions a lot of life is about decisions. It's about choices. And she made that choice. She's made a lot of other choices that were very intentional. And same with my father, a lot of intentional, choices. And even when they did divorce, for instance, my father gave her the house. Now, he was the breadwinner pretty much prior to her getting the divorce. He was the breadwinner. He was the one bringing in the money. And yet he wanted to set us up to win too. So I give my father props. And when they divorced, he didn't want her to be without a house. He knew she was going to be the primary custody person for us. And he wanted her to be set up to win. So he moved into an apartment complex. It's actually the same complex that the infamous Jeffrey Dahmer would end up doing a lot of these murders in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee. My father lived in that same complex. And the truth is he gave up sort of a nice middle-class home in order to make sure my mom and me and my brother were taken care of. So I give him props as well.
That, fellas, I hope y'all are paying attention to that. Just that concept alone is worth us just diving into, but we're going to keep moving. But the whole notion of they chose us over their problems, and to me, when you think about manhood, right, we think about manhood from a physical perspective of, who's the biggest man, or somebody say something to my girl, I'm going to go kick we're thinking about it from that perspective. Manhood is about actions, being decisive, but then also thinking about the bigger picture. And
that's correct.
Your father set the stage for manhood by saying, you know what, I will go live in the apartment. I understand that mom and dad aren't going to be together. I'll go live in the apartment because you said something powerful there. He was setting us up to win.
That's right.
That in itself is something that I wonder if little things like that or little inspirations or little nuggets like that stayed in your spirit as you started matriculating through this life, in the very public eye.
Bro, not only did it stay in a little way, it really was the foundation of who I am. I saw it. And I know you were just speaking, but it's so not little too. You know what I mean? Because it's like setting your kids up and setting your people up to win is what I believe manhood is about. And womanhood, my mother did the same thing. It's really what it's all about. And as I'm now obviously an adult with two children biologically and one adopted son of my own, it's the same difference. I'm setting them up to win. I want them to win. And so whatever we could do to set them up, that's the key. That's the thing that I feel is my biggest role. And to set my queen up as well, my wife, to set her up to win. So that's the goal. Set
up to win. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's I interviewed a brother, it was a few months ago, and he did like high jump. So he did the high jump at University of Tennessee. And one of the things that he talked about was this thing called the penultimate, right? And see, I'm not a high jumper. I'm I claim 5'7", but I ain't quite there yet. And so vertically challenged. So high jump. It's all good. We bring other things to the table. But the thing is, he talked about this thing called the penultimate, which is in essence the step before the last step when you do the high jump. And in essence, in the schematics of taking or doing the high jump, he mentioned how the penultimate or that step before the last step was the most important because that's where you get your momentum. That's where you set everything up. And that in essence is the thing that propels you to get over the bar. And so to me, hearing that, I try to think about connections. I think about just this whole premise of you creating things to set others up for success. It's kind of like that penultimate step that you're taking.
Yep. I love that. I love that analogy you use. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And so you move from Milwaukee to Ripley, Tennessee. Now Ripley is north of Memphis, correct?
Yeah. So, I was actually in a smaller town even than Ripley, but I say Ripley because people never know this town I'm about to mention. It's called Glimp. Glimp, Tennessee has less than 1,000 people in it, probably. I'm not sure, but very, very small rural town. And I didn't move there per se. I used to go there every summer. So my grandmother, my father's mother, lived there, and she had acres of land. She had, snap peas and greens and various things that she was growing in the back there, and wild hogs, chickens, stuff like this. And so long story short, it was farm life. And I would go there every summer and spend about 3 months out of the year there. And then a little time in East St. Louis, which was my mother's hometown, my mother's hometown as well. East St. Louis. So East St. Louis, Glenn, Tennessee, and Milwaukee. Those were the 3 places I would go every year.
Wow. And so you had the awareness of who you were. Like, again, when I go back to just thinking about like the steps that your parents took, like you went to Africa as a 2-year-old, the whole Black Power movement, just understanding who you are. You just had this sense of self in the midst of, and you were born late 60s. So you were in the tail end of the civil rights movement, and just all of that was coming together and culminating. But then you juxtapose that to having this 3-month country experience where you were out kind of in the middle of nowhere. You had the best of both worlds, so to speak.
Yeah, I was born in 68, the same year Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated.
Absolutely.
And my mother was obviously pregnant during the time of all of that turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of my DNA. And then my parents being about the struggle, to me, that needs to be the normal way Black kids are raised. That's my dream. That's my goal as I strive to teach people in prisons now or at schools. I strive to teach parents and kids that the normal way of Black people living should be how I was raised, basically understanding our root and connection to Africa, understanding who we are historically in this country, understanding the how far behind we are in this country by nature of the history of this country, and then being determined to rise above it despite it. Those are the things that I feel are necessary for all Black people, not just me. I was fortunate enough to have that, but I really wish that upon every parent. I believe it's important.
And it's so powerful to hear you tell this story and really talk about it, because it gives a further understanding of the background with Arrested Development. When we hear the music now and we see the dashikis back before they were cool around everybody, and really the truly empowering messages and really conscious and woke before everybody woke up. You know what I'm saying? Like, this really helped to give me a perspective to inform me as to some of the background behind a lot of that. Right? Yeah,
no doubt. I mean, don't get me wrong. Just like any young teen, I was the same as many young teens. My mom and dad were conscious and they were all up on it, but I wasn't trying to hear that for certain parts of my teenage years.
Absolutely.
And yet when I got a little older, I tried, being a gangster hip hop artist. I tried doing a lot of things, but I realized that who I really am is just who I am. And that was Arrested Development. Like, when I finally came up with doing a group called Arrested Development, that's when I finally said, you know what, I just got to be who I am. And that's what the music reflected, was basically who I am.
And so, speaking of music, just kind of jumping into that, like, where did that come from? Were you always a musical brother? Were you always someone who was musically inclined, or were you exposed to something and you just kind of just pursued it? Like, how did this thing kind of come to fruition as well?
Well, I always loved music. When I saw the Jackson 5, they used to have a cartoon show back in the 60s or 70s. And I used to watch it. And Michael Jackson was one of my favorites. This is prior to his solo career. And I just was like idolizing him, and I wanted to be like him. So even as about 5 years old, I wanted to dance, sing, like Michael Jackson. But then when I got introduced to hip hop music, that really changed my whole perspective. I was about probably about 12 or so when I heard Rapper's Delight. I forget the exact year, but somewhere in the late 70s, I heard Rapper's Delight, and it just blew my mind. And from that point on, I wanted to be in hip hop. And I started off as a DJ. My father owned a nightclub. As I told you, he was an entrepreneur. Now, my dad, at certain points, owned a gas station. He owned a nightclub. He owned 2 different restaurants. He owned a catering business, a fast food restaurant. So, in a small newspaper prior to my mother doing hers. So, he was very much a serial entrepreneur. And in Milwaukee in the early 70s, he was named as the best businessman in Milwaukee. Not the best Black businessman, just the best businessman.
Wow, that's
but
powerful.
It was really powerful. I'm very proud of him. And at the same time, though, being a black man, tall, dark-skinned, 6'4", with a very light-skinned wife, black but light-skinned wife, high yellow wife, and it was causing pain to certain racist tenants in Wisconsin, and so they came after him, and they really crushed a lot of his business endeavors. Before they knew it, he had all types of tax things leaned up against him, taking his properties, taking his businesses. And so my mother had to step up and do many things in that era. And that's when she started her newspaper. So it was a lot of ups and downs because of the racism. It really wasn't even him doing anything wrong with his taxes. They just came after him and found various things against him and just started destroying his success, his run of successes. So that also happens here in the States. You know, we've seen it with, you know, whether it's Black Wall Street or, you know, down in Florida or numerous communities where we're starting to do well, whether it's Tulsa or Florida or Mississippi, we're starting
Seneca
to do
Village
well,
in New York, everywhere.
That's correct. And the government starts to come after us and find ways to destroy us. That is exactly what happened. My father was getting too big, too powerful, too quick. And they came after him. He was doing nothing illegal, but they still came after him.
Wow. And so it's just like, and it's amazing because you were witness to all of this, and then
all of it
plus more. And then, you know, a few years later, you were blessed to use your talent and be in a position to basically have this meteoric rise to everybody in the world knows who Speech is. How did all of those experiences you grew up with, how did those experiences then inform you as now you're on the cover of everything, on every video across the world, you're selling out arenas and all? How did that inform your psyche? How did that inform your spirit, so to speak, knowing all the things that you knew growing up with, you know, your parents and their entrepreneurial journeys?
Well, a few things. One is that I knew I couldn't rely on the system to maintain my celebrity and my fame and my status. I had to go independent. And so right off the bat, my mother, again, set me up to win. As soon as Arrested Development blew up, she moved from Milwaukee to Atlanta. She helped me set up my business, and I set up a business called Vagabond, which still exists today. And we basically bought at first a house and later moved into a building, a commercial building. And that was where we did all of the business aspect of Arrested Development. So that really helped me to, number one, save a lot of money, not rely on business managers and other people to deal with the money aspect of the group and the success we were getting. But it also taught us how to be more independent as a group. So it wasn't just me doing this. Like, it was myself leading Vagabond, the company I just mentioned. But even in the group, Airly Tari, one of the other members, she would be doing all of our styling. Razadam, one of the other members, was doing all of our branding and marketing. He did the logos for the group and so on and so forth. So it was a very much a do-it-yourself, self-determination outfit. That's what we were all about, was striving to do as much as we could on our own so that they couldn't take the success from us, because we knew that with the messages we were sharing, it was just a matter of time before the mainstream music industry would not see us as advantageous. And so we was really on that type of, you know, consciousness and thought process from the very beginning.
Wow. I mean, y'all were on what everybody is proposing and talking about now. You know, I mean, with the unfortunate passing recently of Nipsey Hussle, you know, that really kind of opened up the floodgates to this notion of ownership and controlling and doing all of these things and making moves behind the scenes, so to speak. And it's becoming mainstream. And this is what everybody should be doing. But it's interesting. You all had this playbook 25, 26 years ago. Like, and you don't hear a whole lot about that on the front end, whereas this thing here needs to be out front. Like, brother, that's powerful.
Well, I appreciate that very much, bro. And I will say this, you know, you saw the Nigga Factory. There is a concerted effort to strive to not just mash us down as a people, but mash down the ideas and the